And Caroline, if you want to share your screen, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for coming today. And if you want to put up your slides now, that would be great.
Fantastic, Emer. Thank you very much. And is that sharing yet?
Not yet. Oh, let's see. It's coming up now. Yeah. So you just have to make it full screen.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be with you this morning. My talk is going to be centered on a piece of research that we have just finalized for NESCM, which we launched about 3 weeks ago now. And it's looking at long-term resilient and sustainable cities. It was a scoping paper, and for this talk in particular, I'll hone in on the environmental resilience pieces within that document. Just say then that the purpose of that research, which was undertaken by Maynooth University, was to explore the conditions required to enable cities across the island of Ireland to build resilience and to develop in a sustainable manner. And within that report, we included a number of case studies and vignettes, and primarily we focused on Belfast, on Bristol, and on Milan. And all three of those cities are part of the 100 Resilient Cities Network, which was established in 2013 by the Rockefeller Foundation to help cities build resilience, recognizing that diverse physical, social, and economic challenges facing cities in the 21st century are as a result of combined impact of accumulated stresses and sudden shocks. So today's presentation will have four elements to it and will take approximately 15 minutes. So to start off, to understand what resilience is, well, resilience is not a new concept. It's rooted in action, not just high-level principles, but it's not very well defined. And this has led to some criticism for its vagueness and malleability. But at the same time, it sees very traits that enable it to become a bridging concept between the challenges facing the natural world and the resulting policy responses. At a socio-ecological level, it understands that systems are constantly changing, albeit in a non-linear way, and that to be effective, highly complex and often clunky systems in operation across cities need to adapt. Since the 1960s, the term has been closely associated with systems change and the achievement of an equilibrium across a range of disciplines, whether that be from physical science to ecology, engineering, economic geography, disaster studies, environmental management, and indeed spatial planning. In the early 2000s, resilience became associated with a place's or indeed a sector's bounce back ability. And a decade on, the bounce back ability has been replaced with build back better, the principle of which is to use a shock event or a disaster to create more resilient nations and societies than before through the responses adapted. Fostering resilience in the face of such challenges has captured the attention of governments, policymakers, academia, investors alike, not least in response to the climate emergency. And COVID-19 has presented us with the lens to see this evolution at play, where the overriding message is that we don't just want to bounce back and return to normal, but rather that we want to take this global disaster to press pause, rethink what we are doing and where we are doing it and how we are doing it, and to build back better, or indeed maybe build back different. For the purpose of our study, we took this definition of resilience that has been developed by Miro et al. In 2016. There are over 25 definitions of resilience, each very distinct. But for the purposes of our study, we picked this one because it speaks to the ability of an urban system and all its networks across temporal and spatial scales to bounce back, to adapt to change, and as required to transform its systems and processes that may limit current or future adaptive capacity. It speaks to the capacity of cities to survive and adapt, and recognises that resilient cities need strong city leadership and good networks upon which resilience can be built in a holistic way that understands the dependencies that exist across city services, the potential vulnerabilities to stresses and shocks, and the resulting cascading effect. In terms of looking at then globally, as urbanization increases, the scale and predictability of risk becomes complex and unstable. Some, like flooding, are not new, but they're increasing in scale and intensity and frequency. Other shocks, such as disease pandemics, are posing new challenges. This has led to a proliferation of frameworks, programs, and networks being established over the last 10 to 15 years. All speak to the importance of pursuing sustainable development or addressing climate and environmental challenges and making the transition just and inclusive for all. And most of these networks engage with local government, so they're very useful resources. And they speak particularly to the seminal role of action at the local level in building resilience. As picking up on the role of action at the local level in progressing a resilience agenda, the new Leipzig Charter, adopted in November 2020, speaks to the transformative power of cities for the common good. The Charter is a key policy framework for sustainable urban development, to which Ireland is a signatory. It emphasises the flexibility needed within cities and their urban systems to respond to disruptive events and chronic stresses, while learning from past events and each other. The resulting transformations it contends should be based on the integration of social, ecological, and economic dimensions of sustainable development through the just city, the green city, and the productive city. So looking at resilience in action, well, drawing on core themes emanating from the Global Resilience Agenda, we looked at Ireland through 3 resilient policy agendas, namely climate resilience, socioeconomic resilience, and environmental resilience. They're all interrelated, so you can't speak about one without speaking about the 3. The resilience debate has in many respects been driven by the climate emergency. It recognises that planning for climate resilience is non-linear, that adapting to climate change will have an effect on the future resilience of jobs and enterprise and will shape society, that it has implications for where development happens, including transport infrastructures, the role of carbon capture, renewable energies, water supply, environmental management, and food security, and many other elements. This requires a place-based approach, building on local knowledge, and thus there is a growing role for local government in specifying these context-specific measures required that will lead to the transitions demanded. But of course, as noted by Rotterdam and their resilience strategy, resilience is more than climate adaptation. Socioeconomic resilience centres on the relationship between people and place, and this is strongly tested by both COVID-19 and Brexit. Recovery strategies are placing a strong emphasis on green recovery, embracing a better economy, better health and well-being, and a pathway to inclusion and just transition. Enterprise and planning policy in both jurisdictions across the island of Ireland place a very strong emphasis on transitioning to a low-carbon economy, developing talent and producing jobs that are resilient into the future, where workers are adaptable with strong transversal skills. Resilience is also a strong theme in Ireland's rural strategy, which was published last month, with a strong emphasis on making rural living a viable option. And then turning to environmental resilience. And we have a nature in crisis. Nature is collapsing at an alarming and unprecedented rate. The resulting loss is systemic, structural, and interconnected with the ecological disruption and underestimated security threat. Globally, we have lost 60% of our wild invertebrates and up to 76% of our insects since 1970. In Ireland, 2/3 of our birds are of conservation concern, and 1/3 of our bee species is threatened with extinction. Nature loss is impacting on climate change, but also on human health and quality of life. Nature-based solutions are spatial interventions that use the natural properties of our ecosystems to deliver multiple benefits. They are defined as living solutions that address societal challenges in a resource-efficient and adaptable manner, and to provide simultaneously economic, social, and environmental benefits. And they're a priority for member states across the EU. Examples include different forms of green and blue infrastructure, green roofs and walls, rain gardens, sustainable urban drainage systems, natural water retention measures, hedgerows, floodplains, and urban green spaces. So some of the examples of nature-based solutions that came out of our study for NESC. In Belfast, at the same time that the resilient team within the council were identifying its shocks and stresses, the Place-Based Climate Action Network, or PCAN, was established in Queen's University. A key output from this research partnership was the Mini-Stern report, a net zero carbon roadmap for Belfast. This report estimated Belfast's total carbon budget, its current annual emissions, and from this concluded that it would use up its carbon budget in just over 9 years' time. A stark statistic that speaks to the urgency of the crisis we face, highlighting the importance of data and the information and insights this provides. And statistics like that really instilled then an urgency for action. In Milan, as the council commenced work on its spatial plan, Milan 2030, the resilient team were moved into the urban planning department. This gave the team the opportunity to examine the role and purpose of resilience in a plan under development, and provided a concrete mechanism under which to apply the concept to policy. In its final plan, Milan 2030, a key objective is a green, livable, and resilient city. This includes a new urban forest strategy, the reopening of the city's canal system, and the creation of 20 new parks. Through the input of the resilient team, the resulting spatial plan puts a very strong emphasis on sustainability, resilience, and quality of life, with the neighbourhood being the centre of change. In Bristol, as part of its One City plan, Bristol published its One City Ecological Strategy in September 2020. It commits to 30% of Bristol's land being managed for nature. An action dependent on collaboration of multiple partners across the city. Recognising that other elements of the One City plan call for development in housing and transport and energy, for example, this ecological strategy calls for all future development to deliver a net gain for nature through green buildings, green roofs, living walls, pollinator corridors, amenity spaces, and greener streets. It encourages more food growing within the city, recognising that this is a core role to play in helping to restore habitats across the city. It has a no-mow policy across its road verges. Work is already underway to improve the water quality in Bristol's rivers, waterways, and harbour. And as these natural systems are restored and litter and plastic pollutions tackled, the city's waterways are seen as a valuable, wildlife-rich natural corridor. Both Milan and Belfast resilience strategies include plans for urban afforestation, the planting of 3 million and 1 million trees and shrubs respectively by 2030. And there are many benefits to such green nature recovery corridors, from the absorption of CO2 to improved air quality to support and enhanced biodiversity. While not one of our key cities focused on, we did within the report also look to Derry and the really groundbreaking work that's happening there in terms of looking at green infrastructure, but also natural capital accounting. So within Derry City and Strabane District Council, they developed their first green infrastructure plan in 2019, and this had an associated action plan in place. This was the first such plan in Northern Ireland. And then in 2019, in association with Vivid Economics, the natural capital account was undertaken for all Derry City and Strabane District Councils green spaces, all 223 of them. And this identified that there are more than 5 million visits to Derry and Strabane recreational green spaces each year, and that these benefits provide low-cost benefits to mental well-being and physical health improvements. For every £1 spent, it delivers £22 of benefits, with green spaces providing over £500 of benefit per resident in the city each year. So just bringing this all together then, in terms of lessons learned from the various case studies documented within the report, and in the interest of time, just honing in on two of these. Resilience is highly contextual. While cities and local authorities are addressing problems of a similar nature, each city is unique, and any solution must take into account local considerations. And resilient cities are living cities. COVID-19 has starkly illustrated the hollowing out of our urban cores that have taken place over decades and the resulting lack of vibrancy and people remaining. A city cannot be resilient without people at its beating heart. Resilient cities are living cities, places in which people not only work, but live and enjoy a high quality of life. This raises questions around what role urban design plays, what role for the architect, the landscape designer, the biodiversity officer. Resilience planning is often experimental. We need to experiment. And that planning of our green spaces should not be an afterthought, but should be front and center in all developments that take place within the city. The scoping paper identified 5 key principles for building resilient cities. And again, in the interest of time, just honing in on one of those, and that's the principle of subsidiarity. Building resilient cities requires a rebalancing of power, with cities having the autonomy to make strategic investment decisions that will serve the best interests of the city and region over the long term. Interviewees spoke of the need for cities to have a heart-to-heart conversation with citizens. The directly elected mayor elections in Limerick City and County later this year could be the game changer required in the rebalancing of power, and may prove to be an important laboratory in the design of citizen engagement model that will both unleash the potential of a place while ensuring a joined upness in the delivery of policies. As we investigated city resilience journeys, 2 core elements stood out to us as a necessary component of any city's journey. The first is the importance of collaboration in delivering place-based impact and ensuring the longevity of any resilience pathway. Building resilience is not a one-person show. It is beyond the scope of any one agency. Taking Belfast again as an example, in addition to availing of the supports offered by the 100 Resilient Cities programme, they availed of other opportunities as they presented themselves. For example, the aforementioned PCAN network, which would lead to the Mini Stern report, as I've highlighted, but also the establishment of a Belfast Climate Commission, which rather than detract from the city's resilience journey, only served to strengthen it. And finally, the second standout was the governance arrangements put in place. While noting resilience is not a one person or one organisation show, it absolutely requires a dedicated resource. This is not an add-on to somebody's already full-time role. In addition, the creation of multi-agency oversight boards and a number of sub-boards in both Belfast and Bristol, which brought all the key city stakeholders together to oversee delivery, was integral to city-wide buy-in. And knowing that the actions required to build resilience are not without their pain points, this buy-in is essential. Thank you very much.